CataractCoach.com, podcast series, episode number 63 with Dr. Cynthia Matossian. Welcome back to our Cataract Coach podcast. And today we have Dr. Cynthia Matossian. You've seen her on the podium at so many different meetings. You've learned so much from her. She's been heavily involved in working with ophthalmology plus industry together. She's also been involved in clinical trials. She grew a practice from a tiny thing to a huge thing. And she's got so many other fun projects in ophthalmology. We're going to have a fantastic conversation. Welcome, Cynthia.
Welcome to you too, and thank you for having me. And I am honored and humbled to be invited to your program. So thank you, Uday.
Oh, my pleasure. So tell us, what was your path in ophthalmology?
It was circuitous for sure. You know, not too many people I know had a very direct path.
Right.
I loved ophthalmology, and actually, I don't know why, I fell in love with it, and that's the reason why I went to medical school, actually.
Wow.
I wanted to go to ophthalmology, and I stepped back and said, this is in college. My major was international political science, IR for short, international relations. Part of the junior year abroad program I spent at the United Nations. Instead of going to other parts of the world, I was in New York City. And I hated my time at the United Nations, despised it. Why? Because you are a tiny cog in this huge geopolitical wheel. Where you could have the best interests for a country in mind, but a coup can happen, a tsunami can happen, and everything is out the door. I said, that's not for me. So I came back senior year. I said, I want to feel where it's happy. I want to see men and women. I want to have a direct result for what I do. So I started researching it, and ophthalmology popped up. I said, wow, it's surgery, it's seeing patients, it's all ages. I said, that's what I want to do. So I went to medical school to become an ophthalmologist.
That's very unusual. And in fact,
unusual.
You probably have to play your cards close to your chest. You're doing an OB or peds rotation or general surgery rotation. You can't really tell if you want to go into ophthalmology.
Exactly, especially orthopedics. I remember I said, whoa, I'm so glad I'm not going into ortho. Those big instruments were not for me. I like the dainty ones.
Oh, it's funny. I liked all the above, but yeah, you're right. Most people don't have such a direct route in this. So you finished your training and you decided, what are you going to do? How are you going to set up shop from scratch? Hang a shingle?
Almost. I decided where I wanted to live first. I talked to a lot of colleagues, and I talked to other residents who had graduated. They all said, Cindy, pick the place where you want to live. And even though there may be competition there, you will make it if you stick to it and deliver good care.
Right.
So my husband and I identified a specific part of the country, north of Philadelphia and bucolic Bucks County. And there was one ophthalmologist looking for a junior associate. I joined him for 1 year. It was the best and the worst experience at the same time.
Well, why is that?
I learned everything that I would do differently. And had I not had that experience, I don't think I would have really set up my own shop, Uday. But by going through that, I learned everything I want to do differently. I want to do it my way. So when my 1 year contract was up, I said, thank you and goodbye. And I started my own practice within the, of course, restrictive covenant area. I had to honor that, which I did. I started a small, all I could afford was one lane, one technician. That's all I could do. And that's where I started. And then it grew into a multi-specialty MD/OD practice in 2 states, Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And a few years ago, I sold it after being in the trenches 36 years.
Wow. Tell us about that process, because a lot of us don't know much about that. How does that work?
The process of selling it, or the process of setting up shop? Because I've done it both ends now.
No, honestly, we're here to learn. Our podcast skews a little bit younger, so most of our listeners are under age 50, although we have all ages of ophthalmologists listening to our podcast. but they want to know, like, okay, what was the process? How'd you set up? How'd you transition it? How'd you decide to sell? And how do you determine that? And what was that like? Everything.
Well, a lot of gray hairs later, you kind of gain wisdom along the way. The first thing I did when I set up shop, it was just me in an era where there weren't too many women ophthalmologists, let alone ones who own their own practices. Number one was availability and networking. I would say those two features are what made me grow very, very quickly. I met with every internist, every endocrinologist, every rheumatologist, every family practice specialist. I even went to pharmacists. Back in the day, the mom and pop pharmacies were more common. I went to them and I say, patients talk to you. If they're unhappy or are looking for an eye doctor, send them my way.
Sure.
So I grew my practice that way and being available. If somebody called, had an eye pain, had something in their eye, I said, I'll meet you. I'll meet you now. Come to the office. And that availability was shocking to everybody because most ophthalmologists don't go in to see small kind of non-vision threatening emergencies. And I did the same with a hospital emergency room. I said, send me all your problems. Send me your consults. By doing the consults, I allotted 1 hour every day to do consults at the hospital. I got to know all the nursing staff, all the unit secretaries, and all the doctors in the hospital system I otherwise would not have gotten to interact with. And I said, send me anybody who needs an eye consult. Well, I got to know everybody at the hospital and vice versa. And my practice grew instantly. The nurses became my patients. And once nurses get good treatment, everybody asks them about who to go to.
Right.
So really, that was the golden key.
Wow, that's amazing. And so, you grew it from, you said, just solo you with one exam room to now locations in 2 states, multi-specialty, many doctors in the practice. What were some of the important lessons you learned in growing it? Because obviously we all get growing pains when we're trying to figure out how to grow a practice.
The most important part, I feel, is communication.
Okay.
And that is really one of the secret sauces, in my opinion, for success for any company, corporation, practice, whatever the business entity might be. We had weekly meetings with our staff, and I did the training. So it was training and communication sessions once a week. For every 40 hours worth of work, we had 1 hour worth of training. And I did the agenda, I did the training, and it was with a business office, it was with a billing people, because they needed to know what the procedures were to bill properly. So the money would come in correctly instead of constantly rebilling for incompletely transmitted, let's say, insurance forms. And then the front desk, by them being empowered with knowledge, they could more properly tell the patients which way they needed to be triaged, whether come in immediately or no, that can wait a little bit. So everybody was on the same page and we rode in the same direction to grow and to deliver the best care we could. Always, always keeping the patient in the middle. It was a very patient-centric practice.
Well, I think the important part of there is it was cohesive as an entire team. So it wasn't just the clinical employees. It was everyone is on the same page.
Yeah. And at the same time, and when we grew into 3 offices, we Zoomed. It was before the era of Zoom. We had a whole video system set up so that all practices, all staff could dial in. It was a dialing in process to hear the information at the same time.
And then after growing this over the course of obviously decades, how do you make the decision to say, okay, I'm going to sell the entirety? That's a big move.
It is a big move, and it's not a move that people should take lightly. And the other thing I would advise to anybody who's listening is you need to allow time for that process to happen. For me, it was a 5-year process. And people say, wow, 5 years? Absolutely. It took me about a year first the decision had to be made that I was ready to sell. And I said, I've done it for 36 years. I want to do chapter 2 in my life, which is consulting and starting different companies within ophthalmology. So the first step is find a banker or a broker. And
Okay.
it took me about a year to find the right one. I dated a bunch of them, not technically date, of course. My husband and I are actually celebrating our 40th wedding anniversary in May this year. But I had to shop around to the right banker and broker.
Mm-hmm.
Once I hired that company, they come in, they look at all your paperwork, they look at everything to make sure that they can position you in the best spotlight to attract potential buyers. And that process then took about a year. And then when different prospects were there, I had to get to know them, see what they were
Sure.
offering. You go back and forth. And finally, with mutual respect and agreement, we agreed on a buyer. And then that company, which is backed by PE, purchased Matossian Eye Associates. And then I transitioned down. I didn't go cold turkey because I said, I can't do that. I've been doing this for too long. I'm too passionate about ophthalmology. So a year later, I stopped doing surgery. Then I went down to 2 days a week, only doing interventional dry eye. And then 3 years after the sale, I actually walked out and have not seen a patient now for almost a year and a half.
Wow. But I like the idea of doing a gradual transition as opposed to abrupt.
Right. Because ophthalmology has been my life for so long. For me, I needed that slow taper. I couldn't go cold turkey. For me, that was the right decision.
Right. And even then, I think ophthalmology is such a part of our own identity, our own personality, that you can never fully leave it. So now you have projects in the ophthalmology space. Tell us about some of these.
The two big projects that I'm working on right now, one is called GP Ophtho. It's a group purchasing organization. That's where GPO comes from, group purchasing organization. And I took the O and changed it to Ophtho. The reason I started this, Uday, is that the cost of doing business in ophthalmology is escalating at a very rapid pace. Everything costs more, whether it's staff, whether it's items, partly, because of back order issues, whatever it is, the cost of doing business is going up. What's happening to reimbursements? Only going down. So we have this dichotomy, operating expenses going up, reimbursements going down for those practices who do a lot of cash pay procedures like aesthetics, dry eye interventional procedures, or advanced technology IOLs and corneal refractive procedures. It's great, but not every ophthalmologist out there does enough of these types of procedures to offset that very slim margin that now we are encountering in ophthalmology. So I said, optometrists have and have had for quite some time group purchasing organizations because they had stuff to sell. They had spectacles, they had frames, they had contact. So it made sense to kind of venture into that world. Ophthalmologists have never had that. So I started it. We're about a year and a half into it. Ophthalmologists can join and it's free to join. Just contact me and you can become a member. And now we have about almost 40 business partners, big companies who have partnered with us with negotiated rates that are more helpful to ophthalmologists, whether it's in terms of service contracts or enhanced rates or discounted prices or additional value added packages. It's all kind of part of how to help ophthalmologists become more successful business folk.
Well, it's a fantastic idea, because the purchasing power of the group is far more than just the individual ophthalmologist here or there.
Exactly. And ophthalmologists contact me and say, Cindy, what about this company? Or what about this particular item? For example, last night I got an email from a very well-known cataract surgeon. He said, I found the best attachment microscope to my slit lamp to demonstrate to visiting guests what I'm looking at and how it videos and how it documents the surgical procedure, and it can go on to the surgical microscope as well as a slit lamp. So we're going to be featuring that as one of our business partners, for example.
Wow, that's like right up my alley. Anything recording videos of slit lamp and
Right.
surgery, and would love to check it out. That's awesome. So I'll put a link down below for our viewers and all our listeners. If you want to be a part of this, I'll put the link down below and just click on it and follow through.
That would be great. And I'll send it to you, or do you want me to say it now?
Oh, you can say it now.
Okay, it's Cynthia at GPOptho, that's OPHTHO.com.
Fantastic. And then the website is GP Ophthalmology. Oh, GPOphtho.com.
GPOptho.
Yeah, don't worry. As ophthalmologists, we know the PHTH. We're good.
Exactly. So that's one. The other thing I started, Uday, is something to give back to my community of ophthalmologists. It's a nonprofit organization. It's called the American College of Eye Technicians.
Okay.
American College, ACETI Technicians, but we pronounce it as asset. It's a play on words. Why? Because technicians are an asset to all of us ophthalmologists and to our practices. There are phenomenal training and certification programs that we all know about, Jacopo and Jane Schumann's program and Alchemy Vision. But what was missing in that kind of continuum was the recruitment part.
Right.
So that's what I started. We go to less privileged kind of areas where kids are not college bound, and we talk to high school counselors, junior colleges, vocational schools, technical schools. We go to cosmetology programs, and we say, look, there's this whole field. If you want to come in, there's a very modest tuition. It's an 8-week online program. It's 2 hours a week. So they can have a job, but it's 2 hours a week. It's facilitated, meaning there's an instructor who will teach in a virtual classroom setting so that students can interact. They have homework, they have quizzes, and the content is AAO's medical ophthalmic assisting kind of book content. We transcribed it to a platform called Canvas that we use to teach with. It's taught by COA, COTs, and professional ophthalmic trainers. And then we place them into practices. So these are all kids who never knew about ophthalmology, had probably maybe never even had an eye exam in their life. So we are giving them this very basic foundational training and bringing them into the fold as an entree into the field of ophthalmic assisting.
And that can be a fantastic kind of career opportunity that it can span decades.
Exactly. Or if they have the, let's say, the drive and the initiative, they can start working for a pharmaceutical company or a medical device company. They can become a practice administrator with additional training. So it's really just dipping their toes as an entree into an explosive opportunity. The sky is the limit once you get into ophthalmology. So that's so exciting. We graduated our first 2 students. We have 2 more students in the second cohort. And for the third cohort, we have 5 interested students. So we're gradually like making inroads and growing.
I mean, you bring up an important point, which is, I've had ophthalmic technicians who then, you're right, go on to do bigger things. They go on to become a practice administrator somewhere because they learned the business so well. Or another one became a rep for one of the ophthalmic companies and now travels the whole country, and now became a district manager. I mean, just huge opportunities.
Right. Some of my techs have taken similar paths as well. And actually, a lot of people, when you ask them how they got into ophthalmology, it's serendipity. There is no well-known path to get into it. It's either somebody recommended it, or you started as a receptionist at the front desk of an eye practice, and now you've risen up the ranks and have gotten into industry or become a practice administrator.
Right. And ophthalmology is so unusual compared to other medical specialties. But
Right.
once you finally figure out the eye stuff, you've got such a unique data set of knowledge that it's so uncommon in the community.
And what's great also is that it's everywhere. It's not just limited in certain pockets of the country. It's really Hawaii to Miami, as I say, so that you could take your skill set with you and apply it anywhere if you happen to move for whatever reason.
That's fantastic. So I like those two projects. Are there any
Yeah.
other ways you're still involved in ophthalmology? I see you at the meetings now. You're still obviously going to ophthalmic meetings quite a bit.
I am going to all my usual meetings, Uday, and I am involved in the practice management section of several meetings. The
Okay.
OSN meeting in New York, the Telling It Like It Is in Tampa or Orlando, Florida, and Hawaii and I. So I moderate that session, and I invite different guests to participate and talk to us about practice management. So I love that. I love staying, in contact with my friends and colleagues in
Sure.
ophthalmology, and bring them an aspect of ophthalmology that many who are seeing patients, are busy in the OR, don't really think about. But we are business men and women, as well as ophthalmic surgeons
For sure.
and eye care practitioners. So we need to know the business side to have a successful practice.
Yeah, you had a beautiful session, amazing session at OSHA's Telling It Like It Is meeting in Tampa just a few weeks ago. Do you want to give us a
Thank
couple of
you.
those highlights? Because obviously only a few hundred people could attend the meeting, but we've got thousands of subscribers to Cataract Coach.
Well, some of the points that we covered, and we covered different points at the Hawaiian Eye meeting, Uday. One was on the importance of your social media visibility.
Yeah.
When was the last time, for example, a doctor checked his or her own practice's website? How outdated is the information? How outdated are the pictures, even the pictures of you in there? And then with that, not just website, but your social media. Are you doing enough? Because nowadays people check you out before they even pick up the phone to call you. That's how they find you. So you need to have rankings, you need to have ratings. How do you generate those ratings? Just hoping that you will get different ratings doesn't happen. It's a very calculated way of doing it. And it doesn't just have to be Google. There are many, like there are health grades, there are vital signs, there are all these different rating paths that you really have to follow. And there are ways where you can channel different 5-star ratings into different groupings based on software that you can have integrated within your website or EPM, electronic practice management system.
Right.
So we talked about that. We talked about conversions from standard monofocal IOLs to more. What more is? It could be toric, it could be presbyopia correcting, it could be femto. And how does that happen? How many touch points do you need with a patient? And at what interval, what timeline in that patient's throughput in the practice is it critical to have these touch points? It can't be on the day that you're telling them about an IOL upgrade and ask them to make a decision and have them commit to that financial sum. They need time to digest it. They need time to think about it and then have the opportunity to ask questions. And then the conversion rate becomes much, much, much higher. The importance of a definitive recommendation by the surgeon is another thing. Not enough surgeons say, for you, because of X, Y, and Z, I recommend a toric implant. Your astigmatism is this. It can't be corrected any other way unless you wish to wear glasses 100% of the time. So a definitive, strong recommendation by the surgeon, not just the surgical tech, is what
Mhm.
patients are looking for, and it helps with the upgrade. We also talked about revenue cycle management, and that's something a lot of doctors don't pay attention to.
Right.
How is your billing department doing? Are you keeping track of how big the buckets are, the 30, 60, 90,
Yeah.
120 day and more buckets? When should the payments be coming in? And why are there lag times? What is your rebilling rate or error rate? How can those be fixed? Because each day that you don't get $1 in-house, you're losing money. So there are a lot of pearls in these practice management sessions. So if your audience gets an opportunity, we have them at those 3 meetings.
Well, that's fantastic. You bring a very good point about the touch points. So you can't just give all the information and have the patient make the decision that during that one consultation. So are you emailing them in advance or sending them information ahead of time?
It's all of the above, actually. Having a pre-visit telehealth interview is a very successful way of finding out from the patient their hobbies. What do they like to do? How do they spend their day? And that can be done by a technician who is surgically oriented, not necessarily the surgical scheduler, but somebody who is very kind of knowledgeable about the different types
Sure.
of IOLs. And you can pre-select the types of questions so that the same questions are being asked to every patient. So that can happen by a tech. Now the patient has this pre-visit interview there. They make time and nobody bills for that. The patient is not billed. It's not viewed as a telehealth because the doctor is not so engaged in that visit. Then after the patient is seen by the doctor and some preliminary tests are done, a follow-up telehealth visit can be scheduled that may or may not be billed, depends on how the practice does it, after the patient has had information sent to them via email or different ways of saying, go to our website, look up all these things. These are the implants I recommend for you. And giving the patient an opportunity to ask questions. Because they're overwhelmed when a doctor says, you need surgery. All they hear is surgery to my eye, and they don't hear anything else. Nothing else that you say after that filters. They're focused on, oh my God, somebody is going to cut open my eyeball.
Right.
So anything else you tell them is blah, blah, blah. So you need to let the patient handle that, integrate that, and then re-educate them about IOL options. So,
That's a
and
really great
that
point.
kind of
Yeah.
magical, very specifically choreographed pathway leads to higher conversions.
Right. I also love your advice of give a specific recommendation.
Yes.
And the way I teach colleagues about it is, you went to med school, you're very smart. You were AOA, you're top of your class. But tomorrow, if you need a hip replacement and the orthopedic surgeon says, well, you're an MD, which one do you want? The titanium one, the ceramic coater, the Teflon, the fenestrator one? You'd have no idea. And you're an MD.
Exactly. Yes.
So you got to tell the orthopedic surgeon should tell you, based on your activities, your anatomy, your needs for mobility, this is the best option for you. And I want the expert opinion from him or her.
Exactly. And coexisting disease states. Obviously, if somebody has strabismus, they need prisms in their glasses, you're not going to tell them they're going to be spectacle independent. You're not. They're not going to be. They have an issue.
Right.
And documenting the reason why they are not a candidate medical legally is a very important step, because the patients may not remember that. And then they can say, my doctor didn't give me a pair of glasses that helps me see far and near, but they may not remember that they have some AMD and were not a candidate for it. So reason for not is also very important.
Well, that's good. That's important detail. I don't know if I document that enough. That's a good one to remember.
Because patients don't remember that, and then they complain to their neighbors, oh, I didn't get that offer. I ended up with these that I'm wearing glasses all the time. The other thing that we talked about, we had an attorney on our panel, and she talked about co-management, how complicated it is to follow all the rules, make sure everything is done. And the one takeaway from her presentation is, as an ophthalmologist, do not write a check to the co-managing optometrist.
Okay.
The check, excuse me. I'm sorry about that. I hope we can cut that part out.
Yeah, we'll cut that out. No problem.
Meaning, the check should not be written on the business stationery or business check from the ophthalmologist to the optometrist. It should be either to a third party. There are different software systems that do this, or it could be through the normal Medicare billing where somebody bills the different modifiers and it's automatically split 80-20. Just writing the check with a dollar amount, she said, is not a good idea.
Why? Do you think that exposes them to more liability?
Yes, exactly. And she said that right now, because of co-management is a hot topic right now, especially the big case that happened in Texas last year, where that practice had to pay multi-million-dollar penalty because of their co-managing, I guess, techniques or something like that. I'm not privy to all the details, that it's best to have it done either automatically through Medicare or through different software systems where it's done by a third party.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I mean, I'm in a fortunate position where I don't do any optometric co-management in Los Angeles. It's just I've chosen to get my patients through basically word of mouth or other methods as opposed to that.
Exactly. So each practice is unique, and what works for one practice doesn't work exactly the same way for the second or third practice, because how we get our patients, the percentage of co-management, the responsibilities we delegate to our optometric colleagues are very different. So we have to figure out the best and the most legal way to do this.
Yeah, I got to figure out what works best for you. Well, definitely, we'll check out your sessions. I'll follow you for sure at these sessions at Hawaii and I. You said the Telegate meeting and other meetings. We'll certainly.
And the OSN meeting in New York, yes.
OS in New York. Oh, that's always a fun meeting. I do enjoy that meeting as well.
Yeah, I used to have you on my panel where I used to moderate the IOL section, but I've stepped off of that since, of course, I don't do surgery anymore.
Right. I also used to moderate a session there many years ago, more than 10 years ago. But then I actually took time off of meetings to spend with family while my kids were in their junior high and high school ages. And so gave that up as well.
And it's important to balance life. That's the other thing that I am right now doing a series on physician wellness through Helio and women in ophthalmology. And we're looking at what does balancing work, family, career, meetings, personal health, like making time to work out, making time to eat healthily. What's the level of stress? How do we check on our colleagues with level of stress? Because physician burnout is so big right now.
I don't know if we have a great way.
Sorry about that. Let me just say, we'll cut that section out too. I'll go back to that. Physician burnout is so common these days that we really need to keep the finger on the pulse on how each of us is doing, not just personally, but our colleagues as well.
Right. I mean, that's a tough topic now, because it seems like, as you said before, costs are up, reimbursements are down. So we're working even harder just to tread water and stay in place.
Exactly. With a lot more required of us in terms of documentation, that added or really kind of catapulted us into becoming a lot more stressed. I have to cough. Sorry about that. Again, well, just cut that out.
We're gonna cut out the whole thing now. Yeah, we're gonna start again.
No, just those coughing fits. Adding the documentation piece, once EMR became an integral part of our practices, led to a lot of stress. Many doctors don't have time to do it during the actual patient clinic time because they're trying to get from one patient to another to avoid patients complaining about waiting too long. So they stay sometimes 1-2+ hours in the office once the last patient leaves to complete all the paperwork.
Wow.
Which means that, oh my God, now they're getting home late. They're not seeing their partner. They're not seeing their kids. They're not part of the family meal. And that creates a change in the dynamic. So it's not a healthy way. We need help. We need help with people helping us document. We need easier ways to document. And we need less kind of repetitive documentation that's often required of us.
Yeah, it seems like we physicians haven't had enough of a role in a lot of this stuff. So we just get the rules put onto us, onto our shoulders, and it's our job just to carry this big burden.
It really is. And then we have to adhere to different kinds of rules, making sure that diabetics are seen once a year, that everything is documented, or we get penalized. And so do the primary care doctors.
Yeah, it's a brave new world here. So there's some serious challenges, but that's why I see more of us now doing things outside of the scrutiny of insurance companies. It's going to be ophthalmology is moving more like dermatology or plastic surgery, where it's patients paying out of pocket for elective procedures.
And part of that is minimizing the scrutiny and maximizing the revenue that we can generate, because if we just rely strictly on reimbursed amounts from different insurance carriers, the amount of work we're putting in, even for cataract surgery,
Right.
you know, we see these patients, we counsel them, we take them to the OR, we monitor them for 90 days, and we get somewhere in the ballpark of $550. Well, if you break it down to all the different visits, the expertise, the surgical risk we're taking, you know, our skill set, I believe, deserves more than that $500 value. By adding advanced technology implants, now, yes, that compensation makes a lot more sense. But again, the percentage of premium IOLs is creeping up, but maybe it's up to 18% now, but it's not as high as I would have thought we would have gotten to. We have really good implant options right now, especially the toric ones.
Right, toric IOLs are
Right. That's
as
almost
we,
a slam dunk. If you have astigmatism, why not help the patient address their pre-existing, you know, astigmatic irregularities? And of course, with presbyopia, we have so many wide array of implants, including the light adjustable, the diffractive, non-diffractives. You can match it now, mix and match in whatever way that works for the patient to help them become less dependent on their presbyopia glasses.
Yeah, so many more options are available, and obviously, as you know, the pipeline is rich with even more options coming.
Right. And
But I
you're
think
working on one of those lenses. Tell us about that.
I did early on. I did. I was
Okay.
the first surgeon to implant the lens Gen Juvene in 2015, so 9 years ago, and we did that in Panama, and then I did more cases in Mexico, and now it's currently beginning FDA trials here in the U.S. I'm actually not one of the trial sites. In Beverly Hills, I have a very difficult time enrolling or recruiting patients to be involved in any kind of study.
I'm sure. Mm-hmm.
So sometimes the Beverly Hills patients are special breed. I had one recently tell me, she says, "Doctor, I'm so happy after cataract surgery. Of all my service personnel, you and my chef are my favorites." And I was like, wow, that must be one heck of a chef.
Yes,
I said, thank you. I'm honored.
Well, that's a compliment to be as loved as his chef or her chef.
Right. So I was like, I'll be your service person, no problem at all. But obviously, that's one of our challenges. What we do
Right.
is that, we enjoy working with our hands. We enjoy doing that. But in essence, we're laborers, highly skilled, well compensated, usually laborers, though. But so
Right.
you can't generate it when you're not there. When you're on vacation, you're not doing any surgery.
Exactly, because we do it piecemeal. It's not a product that can be scaled up and sold in boxes.
Right. Right. But it's like the month.
I love it.
Me too. It's
I
an
mean, that's
amazing
why we're
thing.
so passionate about it.
So I'm surprised to hear that. I guess wellness is I'd understand if you're like a neurosurgeon or even a interventional cardiologist, your wellness factor your score is probably low. But ophthalmology, I thought it'd be such a happy-go-lucky specialty, but there's still some wellness issues.
There are actually, not in terms of most ophthalmologists are happy with their choice. It's the stress they feel between all the responsibilities that's expected of them, whether it's in academic institutions, private practice, it's running the practice, plus seeing patients, plus documenting, plus overseeing the billing. It's just becoming very complex, and the penalties or the negative consequences of doing something wrong is becoming heavier and kind of expensive. Even if it's an honest mistake, you didn't know to do something, people are breathing down your neck.
Right. And as you say, for a surgery that reimburses you, let's say $500, you take on a liability of millions?
Mhm.
It's like the math doesn't math.
Exactly. And I think if reimbursements were higher, or if there was less paperwork required, or if the patients overall were more realistic in their expectations of what's going to happen to their vision after surgery, I think the stress level would be less.
Yes, but even then, in the operating room,
Right.
we have to perform at like 100%, like 99% is not good enough.
110%. Exactly.
Right.
There's no margin for error. Literally, microns were operating with margins of error of microns. How thin is the thickness of the posterior capsule, for
4
example?
microns. Right.
Exactly. One little mistake, and boom, you're in a level you didn't want to be in.
You're in a world of hurt. Right. You got to think about it. That 4 microns is
Yes.
about half the diameter of a red cell. A red blood cell is 7.5 microns in diameter.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
like,
a
wow.
margin of error. And then if you look at like Schlemm's canal or canaloplasty procedures, or when we're dealing with macular procedures, I mean, we're really working in excruciatingly nano world of anatomy
Right.
that is not, there is no leeway for making any mistake whatsoever.
Yet the tissues are unforgiving.
Unforgiving.
You can't put
Yep.
the posterior capsule back together again.
No, you can't. Not yet, at least. They don't have a synthetic one. Maybe
But
one day.
these are great points. I think I've noticed that the younger generation of ophthalmologists actually does a better job than certainly my generation of that work-life balance and kind of
Mhm.
achieving wellness. So
I agree with that. And they kind of request that as part of their negotiating points when they sign up with practices. They say, maybe I want to work 4.5 days a week or 4 days a week. I don't want to work 5 days a week. Or I don't want evening hours and I don't want Saturdays. Or if I do, maybe it's once a month where I work one evening or one Saturday. They're trying to have that better balance so that they have time to go work out. They have time to go home and prepare a healthy meal instead of grabbing something from a fast food joint at 10 o'clock at night as they're driving home exhausted.
right, you can't burn the candle at both ends for
No, you
forever.
can't.
It ends
You
up catching
can't.
up to you very quickly. The other part that's difficult now is that with the increased amount of training. So now, unlike my generation or yours, where we just did med school undergraduate right into med school. Now it's very common to take a gap year or 2 or 3, get an additional master's or a PhD or an MBA or another degree. Then you do your internship residency. Then these days, people doing 1-year fellowship, 2-year fellowships, you may not be finished with your training until you're like early or mid 30s.
Exactly. And then how long do you have? What's your runway to pay back now all of these loans? Of course,
Oh boy.
all those additional levels of training cost money. So now you're burdened with student loans, plus you need to generate money. And then your runway is getting shorter because now you're entering your career, starting to earn money in your mid-30s.
And you need to find a mate. And if you want to start a family, even
Right.
more stress.
And you need to have a financial advisor, because often you're so preoccupied with all these other distractions and responsibilities in your life. The last thing that you do is start saving from the very first paycheck that you get. Say, oh, I'll get to it. I'm only making X now. I'm sure I'll be making more, so I'll deal with it later. But the later you wait to start saving, actually it costs you more and the money doesn't grow as much. You have to start putting it in as early as possible, even though the sum may be much smaller. That actually accrues over time more than bigger lump sums placed into the retirement pool later on in one's career. So getting a financial or wealth management advisor very early on in your life, basically as soon as you start your job, is when you should start getting it. And they'll figure out with you how much loans do you pay back, where do you start, and how do you start your retirement? Do you start something for your kids' college fund? And they will help you decide, do you lease a car? Do you buy a car? What are the pros and cons? So all these are, there are experts in this field. Don't try to do it yourself.
I like that idea. Surround yourself with experts, right?
Yes.
It makes a ton of sense. Well, these are such important life lessons. I mean, I love talking to you. I love to hear your story and how you've done all these amazing things. I am certainly, as soon as we're done, I'm going to gpoptho.com. I'm signing up. I want to see what I can say about some purchasing.
Become a member. As I said, it's complimentary.
It can't be that. The price is right. If it's free.
Right. And you get really good deals. And we have been so lucky that companies are now calling us saying, can we be part of your group purchasing organization? Because what companies are facing right now, not all, but most, is that the physician is no longer the decision maker, because in aggregate practices where PE-backed businesses have M&A, merged and acquired, different practices, they have a procurement specialist. They have somebody who's making the decisions of what pieces of equipment to buy or not to buy, or when to buy. In academia, many people are employed physicians, not all academic situations, but many are employed ophthalmologists. They're too removed from the decision-making process of different pieces of equipment. So companies are not able to get in front of doctors to show them the nuances of their particular diagnostic tool or phaco machine or IOL or whatever it might be. So it's a great partnership, and we're helping doctors become better rounded with all the different pieces of information that we're able to deliver to them.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, again, we'll put a link down below, and I want to thank you again for doing this podcast. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I always learn so much.
And I learned so much from you, Uday. So thank you so much for having me. I had a blast talking to you.
Awesome. And I want to remind our viewers and listeners, remember, I got a new podcast every Sunday, every single week. We're on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, YouTube, anywhere you find your podcast, you're going to find the CataractCoach.com podcast. And we will check you next time.